Here we go. Maybe. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Great. Well, glad you're here with me today. So let's pray ourselves in. Let us close your eyes and take a deep breath. Spirit, we are open and receptive to your presence and enlightenment this morning. We give thanks that this time together is fruitful for all of us, that it inspires creative thinking and divine ideas. And so we enter this time with a sense of enthusiasm, excitement, and expectancy. Thank you, God. Amen. Okay, well, this is the last one, y'all. So let's really pump it up. Just a reminder, so we all want to listen with our hearts, open heart, open mind. Be sure to share from the first person rather than saying you, say I. It makes it far more powerful. Stay with the topic. Respect each other's opinions. This isn't a debate. We just share our thoughts and trust that God speaks through people, and we will hear things that are important for us to hear as well as speak through. And then take a moment to consider what qualities you're willing to bring to our conversation today. So I know that I'm willing to bring an open heart and mind, a curiosity, and I'm willing to be focused and attentive. So just decide for yourselves what you're willing to bring. Okay. This is a repeat, but hi Betty, I wanted us to think again about what our understanding of racism is, because in the book, Kendi expands it so that the idea of racism becomes, it's not just about color, it's about other things. So just share what your thoughts are this morning about racism. Anybody? Don't forget to unmute yourself. Nobody? Unmute yourself, Sig. There you go.
I called myself doing that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. What I have learned through trial and error and many mistakes and many accomplishments is you don't have to understand a culture, a way of life, a race, attitude, sexual orientation. You don't have to understand them to accept them and
Right.
to be forthright and not speaking against them.
Great. Thank you. Who else? Anyone else want to comment on this one? Okay, I'm gonna move on.
No, I unmuted myself, but then when she spoke, it muted again. But I just wanted to quickly say, I see what he's aiming at. It's that different, we're focusing on differences and one better than the other and so forth. But I hate to use that when we're talking about other situations where it might be because of a religion, differences in religion. I don't call that racism if we have something against another religion. But it doesn't matter, because the things that we're doing wrong are the same in all cases. The reason I wanted to jump in here is because I have some Baha'i friends, and they are very appreciative of all faiths. And they have a saying that we are all flowers in God's garden. So your flowers can be many different colors, but we are all flowers in God's garden. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Well, I think racism is also judging others against what we believe is the right.
Yeah, great. Great, thank you. Anybody else? Then let's take a look at this one. We did this one last time too, but I wanted to just go over it again and see if you have any comments today, where he says, Kathy, would you read that one for us, loud and clear?
Anti-racism is a transformative concept that reorients and re-energizes the conversation about racism and points us toward liberating new ways of thinking about ourselves and others.
Thank you. Boy, there was some echoing in that. Could you hear it?
I know there's echoing in everybody but you. I don't know why.
Oh, no. So back to this one. Thanks, yeah. Have you noticed yourself, since we've been having these conversations, have you noticed yourself thinking in any new ways? Or being aware in any new ways?
This is Sig. I have become more aware, yes.
Great, thank you. Of what?
Of the way I speak, the way I think about when I say something usually it's from my long distance past that I grew up with, so-and-so is, you have a tendency to categorize groups and races and that's something that I was brought up with, and I'm learning to undo that and rethink.
Great, thank you, Sig. Anybody else on this one? Okay, we're kind of a quiet group this morning. I'm going on. And we looked at this last week as well. The only way to undo racism is to consistently identify and describe it and then dismantle it. So I wanted to take another look at how would you go about dismantling a racist kind of thought or attitude or perception or what's the word I'm looking for? It's a whole set of knowing, a belief system.
This is
But keep it
Kathy.
simple. How would you dismantle?
Hi, this is Kathy. I think the best way, at least for me, is to, when I see myself becoming judgmental or thinking of somebody as maybe less than me or very different from me, I see the God in that person.
You
For
do
me,
what
that's
you
the
see
best
God
way.
in it. Great, great, thank you. Hey, Kath, I'm wondering if we can turn it up in here because I'm having trouble hearing.
Yeah, I'll be right there.
Great, thanks. Who else? Anybody else here? How would you dismantle it? Dismantle any racist thoughts that you might have, any judgments, making somebody wrong, or keeping them outside the circle of your love and acceptance.
Well, I can tell you one thing I'm having trouble with.
Yes.
It's not necessarily, I don't think I have a problem with my speech or my actions as far as a lot of different, whether they're minorities or people, that I encounter. I don't think I have it there, but I have a lot of anger that's coming up from people who destroy things.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm dealing with right now. I can see the God in the people, but I think they're blind to the God within them.
Yeah.
And the destruction that is coming about for people's lives and communities I'm very angry about the actions.
And
And not the protesters per se, but what I would even call the people who want to just destroy things.
right. Did you all hear her? Okay, good. Yeah, and so, you know, anger is a normal human emotion. And it speaks. It's just like any other emotion is instructive. Anger, I think, can be instructive too. And so as you consider how might anger be instructive around dismantling,
I think it's very difficult to dismantle anything when you have opposing sides with so much rage and anger itself.
yes, it is, isn't it? If two sides are going to stay stuck in my way and your way, so as if we approach this from a spiritual aspect, what would be helpful in dismantling racism? Or even, you know, being angry, which is perfectly normal. And, you know, anger is normal. It's what we do with it that makes the difference, right? So what would it instruct you to do? Hello, Betty, what do you want to say?
Betty, yeah. Actually, I had my thought ready when you just said those last two sentences about anger. I think Trevor Noah said something one day, and I don't know who he was quoting, but it was, your challenge is to not become what you despise. So I think that's the first step. We have to dismantle it, starting with ourselves, and don't let that anger become an impediment rather than a stimulant to do the right thing. We don't want it to be doing just what the other people are doing that we despise.
Great, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Yes, Paul? Unmute yourself, Paul. Hit the little microphone.
There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry. This stuff is also complicated. Anyway, I think one of the things we have to be really aware of is that there, and I'm kind of backing up here, there is, when people get together in crowds, there's a thing called crowd psychology. And if you Google that, you'll get some information on what that is. But how people behave in crowds is very different from how people behave individually or in small groups. There's a whole different psychology that occurs. And I think it's important to understand that if we don't look at crowd psychology and what happens to people, and particularly, I mean, what's going on now is it's being militarized. And when you militarize a crowd, you got problems. I don't care. Look at every time that's happened in our history, and you will see that when military kind of actions begin occurring, the whole psyche of the crowd changes. And so I'd ask all of us to take a look at that. And then, you know, when you see this crowd stuff, think about crowd psychology and what's happening there. And I think you'll be amazed at how much of violence is stimulated by militarism.
Yeah. I can't remember who I was listening to just yesterday. Thanks for that, Paul. I think it might have been Joe Dispenza, but talking about the amygdala part of the brain. When for example, your example, Paul, when you militarize protests, you automatically get to the least common denominator in human beings, because there's the experience of being attacked. And if not directly attacked, at least the perception that it's going to happen. So it triggers in the human psyche the amygdala, which is fight or fly, flight or fear, flight or fight. And
It could be called a group think also.
a group thing.
Individually, people are good people, I think, who they want to live in peace and so forth. But when you get together, it becomes a group thing that you're not really thinking on your own end.
You get picked up in the energy, in the energy field that's created. So when that happens, as in Paul's example, there's an energy field that's created. And unless you get out of the energy field, you tend to be swept up in it. But back to dismantling. As I thought about that this morning, knowing we were going to be together, I thought, well, what might I do? I mean, what's my part? I'm not a politician who can create policy, although I could write letters about policy to my senators and congressmen. The first thing, of course, that came to me was, number one, forgive it. Number one, forgive myself for any racist thoughts that might be contributing to an energy field of divisiveness, which we see is existing, right? There's an energy field out there of divisiveness. And so I first of all can forgive myself if I have that thought. And then I can use the tools of denial and affirmation, denial being let go of the thought and replace it with something positive. And then the other thing that I know to do is pray for the people who are in conflict. Because I'm going to be talking about this all month in August. Prayer is probably, as citizens here in the world, prayer is the most powerful kind of energy we can generate. And the more prayer energy that we can generate to contribute to peace and harmonization of or the dissolution of the divisiveness and hate out there, we might see peace. That's all I got to say about this one. Anyone want to add anything else? All right, then, off we go. I think we touched on this last week too. What was the conversation in your home and school regarding, if there was any at all, regarding race, ethnicity, gender identity, and sexual orientation?
This is Georgia.
Hi, Georgia.
Hello. Not so much when I was a kid. Those were not things that we talked about. But since I've been an adult and was introduced to quite a few of those topics about 25 years ago, pretty strongly. For us in our home, it was about learning. It was about actually having conversations with people that resided in each one of those areas. And learning to embrace them for who they were as opposed to who we thought they should be. Mm-hmm. Joe came out as gay when he was 13 years old. He's now
Joby, tell
my-
people who Joe is.
our son. He's now 38, so we've had quite a few years to get used to sexual orientation. But what that led me to, at his urging, was to become part of parents, friends, and families of lesbians and gays. And I was part of that for many, many, many years. Along with that, I was, he brought quite a few young people home whose parents had kicked them out of the home at the age of 14, 15 years old. And so for me, and I think this is who I am, I started having conversations with my dad to a degree about race when I was 9 years old. Don't ask me why I knew to have those conversations with him at the age of 9, but I did. So for me, what I've learned throughout my life is the only way you can move forward is to bring information to people. And I also found that the most effective way to do that is to attach emotion to it, something that touches their heartstrings, make it personal. So many times we try to have intellectual conversations, and quite frankly, that doesn't work. But I worked with the school board, the state school board in Illinois, and I traveled all over the Chicago area giving presentations and training teachers. Had quite a few very interesting conversations that way. But those are the kinds of conversations I think have to happen. They have to be open. You have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to accept things that you haven't been brought up to accept.
Now, what if you put the word I in there instead of you?
That's what I had to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was hard for me to stand up in front of a group of teachers and say, aren't you afraid that your child is going to be promiscuous and live a life that is deplorable and all of that kind of stuff? And I looked at them and I said, both my children were raised in the same household. One's straight, one's gay. Why would I expect either one of them to be different from the other? But it was more about putting it in front of people, and for me to be able to ask them questions. How many children do you have? Do you expect this one to be promiscuous? Or to be able to say to someone, a group of students, where you're talking to a group of students. I had a student that stood up and said she didn't believe in homosexuality and she thought they should all be punished for it. They shouldn't have any rights. And another student stood up and yelled at her, and to be able to say, wait a minute, time out. You need to listen to what she has to say and understand that that's where she lives.
Yeah. So it's a question of coming to understand.
Right.
Listen. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Georgia. Anyone else?
I don't know if you can hear me. This is Karen.
Hi, Karen.
You can hear me. Oh,
Yeah.
this
Great.
is so exciting. I spent my young years in Sioux Falls, South Dakota in the late 40s and 50s. And there were very few, what you would call minority communities there. Blacks, Hispanics. We did have gay and lesbian students in the school, but nobody talked about it. You know, it was just not a topic of conversation. But the big thing that I remember is still going on today, and that's the discrimination against the Native Americans.
Say that again, I didn't hear you.
The discrimination against the Native Americans. And it was very strong, very cruel. Expectations of them that controlled them and stopped their progress and growth in their own way, expecting them to do what white people thought they ought to do. So I've always had a big heart for the indigenous people and their marvelous spirituality, which is so beautiful. So that's about all I have to say. That's the discrimination that I was raised with.
Thank you. Thanks. Great. Did I see someone else who had their hand up? Betty.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I have so much to say, but this is such an interesting topic that it always brings things to mind. How many of you ladies were Girl Scout leaders way back when, at the time that I was leading a troop for many years, they had a program called the Green Circle, and it was based on a poem. The guy know his name now, but anyway, he drew a circle that shut me out, something, 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 but we had the wit and the love to win. We drew a circle that took him in. So they would say that and all stand in a circle and hold hands. And these were, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds on into their teen years. I don't know if anybody does any of that anymore. It was a wonderful lesson on inclusion. And just quickly for Georgia, I have a nephew who's gay, who married a lovely young man several years ago. And they recently adopted a little girl, and they are bringing so much joy into the family. They live in England, so it's all by internet. But that little girl was born to a mother with a bad drug situation. In fact, they even kept the little girl for 6 months to make sure in the agency that there wasn't any brain damage. But anyway, these boys, one is a fashion designer and one is in the theater, so they are art kind of people, but they are loving parents to this child.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Anybody else before I go on? Okay. We might have touched on this too, but I wanted to bring it back again. Racism is a powerful system that creates false hierarchies of human value. It extends beyond race, from the way we regard people of different ethnicities and skin color to the way we treat people of different sexes, gender identities, and body types. So he's really expanded certainly what I thought of as racism. I mean, I would have thought of it as prejudice and bias and things like that, but he's, because Kendi, and if you have a chance to get this book, I do recommend it. He brings an interesting background to what he writes about, and so he wants policies created. He is all about the beginning of creating equity, which is what he's pointing to here. Oh, I didn't mean that. Did not mean that. Whoa, sorry guys.
How do I raise my hand?
Hang on, I'm going back to where I was. There, no. Dang. I'm trying to move the faces so we can see. All right, that's it. Yolanda, were you going to say something? Yoli.
Just that in my lifetime, I've experienced many difficult racist situation. I've always rised above it, you know, and try to understand the level of education of the person and accept the fact that some of them will not change. However, I had this conversation with Pastor Sharon, the other Pastor Sharon, and that is that I truly believe that we give a silence approval when somebody makes a racist statement and you don't say, I'm sorry, but that's not acceptable. It takes guts to do that, but I see a lot of racism, and one of the things that has been difficult for me from being a person from another country to a fully automated American citizen is the fact that I've always been told that I'm not good enough. And so I eventually decided that, you know what, my actions, my experiences, my successfulness is what shows the people what I am and what my people are. But yes, at that point, I've gotten to the point where it's your people against my people because I see so much of it. But if we don't say, hey, that's not acceptable, your silence is your approval.
That's right. Thank you.
Anyway, that's all I wanted to say because there's been painful experiences. I've been told I could not have a job at a nursing, at a child care center because the children's parents may not want a Mexican taking care of them. I was dating a student doctor for many years, and he was dating somebody else, and he told me that the reason that he had moved on was because I would not, as a Mexican, fit the position of a doctor's wife. The only thing he didn't know is I wasn't in love with him. I wouldn't have said yes anyway. But it's always been, I've had jobs with the county public defender's office and all those, and people have actually come up to me and said, it's not fair that you should have the job because you're bilingual. And I say, well, you know, it's fair because I know 3 languages and you compete by skill. And if you feel like you want my position that I want, then you should have the skills. That's all it boils down to. But it's hard to be constantly forgiving. And that's what it boils down to. It's constantly having to be forgiven for being told you're inferior. And I always tell people that say that to me, I'd like to compare my resume to yours. And, you know, that kind of calms things down, but it is very difficult. This is a very difficult time right now. I don't even put a bumper sticker in my car anymore because I'm more careful than usual about my surroundings because the country feels inflamed. And so you have to take extra precautions as a minority.
You have to, is that it? Thanks, Yoli. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass over this because we've really talked about this, I think. Let me think. Don't want that. Let me go here for a minute.
Sharon, am I unmuted?
Paul?
Yeah.
Did you say something?
I just wanted to make a comment about this last group of stuff that we've been talking about. And I think it relates to powerlessness, but any time that I perceive that that I'm doing or saying something that's reducing, well, let me back up and start with the positive. For me, the fundamental concept is that we are all created in image of God. And I don't think that means that God is black, brown, red, white, etc. But I think it means that we all have a touch of the spirit of God within us. That presence is always there. And I think that's what we have to tap into. At least that's been my experience. That's what we have to tap into to overcome the kinds of systematic, I mean, I think there's mental racism and there's structural racism. How we take those mental concepts and convert them to rules for society. That's the thing that, that's the policy side. Yeah. And finding those policies that really discriminate against people. And in Arizona, it's Mexican people, and it's Native American people, and it's black people, brown people. It's on and on. But there's a hotbed of racism in this state, and yeah. we've been here for what, 25 years, I'm always amazed at how racist this state is, so that's the structural piece, and then look at what's happening to people. So anytime we're not lifting people up, or anytime we're pushing people down, particularly, that's when to become aware of my stinking thinking, and what I need to change, how I need to change my perception of that person. And over the years, I've worked with Catholic charities over the years, and had to dodge bishops a lot. But anyway, one of the things that I always used with and we had people from all over the world, not because we did refugee resettlement, we did immigration, we did all those programs that help people to come to this country and adjust and participate in the life of the community. But I think when, my story with the staff was, I would tell them, look, we're one human family, and we have to decide what kind of family we're going to be. And only we can do that. So I saw tremendous transformation occur with people when we really tapped into that, back to creation, back to where we come from, back to who we are, and how do we bring that forward into society. And that's been, I don't know, we just saw a lot of change with people, their attitudes, their beliefs. The other piece is, I think, relationship. If our beliefs about racism, or our feelings about racism, or our attitudes are based in what other people say and do, we've got a problem. Particularly if they're negative. But if they're based in relationship, they're positive. And I find people who are racist either don't know a person, a minority person, or the person that they're demeaning, don't know them, and obviously don't understand them. But when you see something that's different and negative thoughts emerge when positive ones should, that's a place to start in examining my own belief system and what's off track here.
Right.
and even people who aren't what you would think of as racist say and do things that, I mean, I say and do things that are demeaning to people because I don't understand what's demeaning to them.
Right.
And I think that's the key. So I think reorienting that thinking and being aware of when it's off is critical for me.
Acute awareness, acute awareness. Yes, thanks, Paul. Paul, I think you ought to run for Congress.
Oh, please.
You know,
You're muted, Paul. You're muted, Paul.
I'm mute.
I was just saying, if you want to learn how not to communicate, watch Congress. You know, watch our government at work at the national level. That's how not to communicate, how not to get things done, how not to, and Democrat, Republican, I don't care. Doesn't matter.
Amen, amen. Linda.
Yes, dear. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all.
What have you got to say, Linda?
Yeah.
Oh, which part? When we were raising our kids, one of the things I looked forward to when we moved to Arizona is that the kids would be going to school and living in a much more culturally diverse community. And I really liked that. When I was young, growing up in North Dakota and Minnesota, I mean, when I was going to college, my freshman year of college, it was very rare for me to even see a Black person. So, you know, it wasn't a part of my upbringing. But I knew for our kids that, and I don't remember where it came from, but I just knew that I wanted our kids to grow up in surroundings that would help them learn how to respect everyone.
Great. Thanks, Linda.
You're welcome.
Oh, and one more thing before I forget. Yoli, you're the best of the best.
Thanks, Paul.
Reverend Sharon.
Merci beaucoup. Gracias and thank you.
If I could just briefly add to what Paul was saying, one of the things that I've discovered over the last couple of years by traveling with Joseph to South America is that when I'm uncomfortable, check my thoughts.
Yeah.
Because generally when I was uncomfortable, it was because I was around a difference in culture that I did not necessarily understand. And it made me uncomfortable. The only way that I could relieve that discomfort is to learn about it, be with the people, experience their joy in whatever it was that they were doing, their celebrations, their and Joe's engaged to a young man from Ecuador, and they're working to get him up to the United States. But he was telling me the other day that Wilmer's aunt, her cow gave birth, and she was coming into her milk. And one of the things of the culture down there is that they add spices to the colostrum of the cow's milk, and they drink it as a rare treat. And I'm thinking, ew, that's discomfort. Now, you know, it's called pull up your big girl britches and try it. And so it's being open and minded enough to open yourself up to a different culture. And then you can't put you can't go, ooh, and I don't want to hear that kind of stuff anymore.
Right, right, right. I remember being in Machu Picchu a couple years ago, a couple summers ago, and one of the delicacies, probably in all of Peru, I don't know in all of South America, but certainly in the little places we were in en route to Machu Picchu and in Machu Picchu, people, the delicacy, or, you know, what is equivalent to a hamburger there is squirrel. And one of the guys, segueing from what you said, George, about try it, one of the guys on our tour ordered a roasted squirrel. And okay, guess what my first reaction was? Ew. But he said he broke a piece off. He said, here, try it. And it wasn't all that bad. But that idea of just put yourself in it. Just, you know, do something that is a cultural norm in another culture, and just try it on. So here we go. Let's look at what he says about colorism here. He breaks down, let me just, I think I've got a page coming up about it, but he talks about racism in various arenas, in biology, in power, ethnicity, body type, behavior, color, class, gender, sexuality, what success and failure are. All those categories are areas that he touches on in the book as being, can be racist or anti-racist in terms of our thinking, our perception, and so forth. So here's colorism. Betty, would you read those for us? Unmute. Betty, unmute. There.
Okay. Colorism, a powerful collection of racist policies that lead to inequities between light people and dark people, supported by racist ideas about light and dark people. Want me to read all of them?
Please.
Yeah. Color anti-racism, a powerful collection of anti-racist policies that lead to equity between light people and dark people, supported by anti-racist ideas about light people and dark people. Dr. Kendi admits that he chose an HBCU, historically Black college and university. He wore contacts that lightened his eyes, straightened his hair. Many Black people were doing this. He calls it colorism. Radical false pride. Have you ever done anything to fit in?
Have you ever done anything to fit in, y'all? Yoli never has. I remember in 8th grade, there was a group of girls, and if there's ever a time when kids want to fit in, it's in the 7th and 8th grade in high school, right? Group of girls called themselves the Pink Ladies. And I was invited into the group, and how we all fit in together was we all had gray jackets with pink collars and pink things on the side. So there is that longing to belong to a circle of acceptance. And it's easy to do some strange things in order to do that, in order to fit in. As Kendi said, I mean, it wasn't too radical. He straightened his hair, as many of the Black students were, and wore contacts that lightened his eyes. There's also some cream you can put on that lightens your skin.
I think it's interesting in the news broadcast that I've seen with Michelle Obama now, that she has let her hair go curly, where she straightened it the whole time that she was, you know, in the White House.
Yeah.
So it's both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. Good observation. Anybody else comment on this?
The only thing I ever did was, by the time I was in third grade, I already had my breasts and everything else. And so I had to dress in big clothes to try to hide myself so people wouldn't pick on me.
Oh, right, right.
But they would draw pictures of me and, say things. But it was mostly because of my maturity, I guess.
Right, right.
Hi,
Help be kid. Yoli, did you have your hand up?
oh, wait.
No, go ahead, Kathy.
I never thought about it until just now, but when I was a kid, because of my height, I was like a head and a half taller than any of the other girls in my class.
Wow.
So my parents, and I don't remember this, but my parents have told me that when I was a kid, I used to almost be hunched over, trying to shrink down to not be so tall. And so my posture was really bad until I grew up.
Wow. Doesn't that just touch your compassionate heart when you hear about the things that especially kids do to fit in?
Us shorties were jealous. I did want to say something that I learned about racism in the last 10 years or so is I never realized that there's within each race, there's actually also a racism to it. I don't know how to put this, but a black man that prefers a lighter skinned black, or I had that experience when I was a teenager. I was dating a Mexican man that was dark, and my uncle did not like it. He told me, too dark for you. And so I have when I worked in the jail system, I interviewed a Native American girl who just absolutely had a fit when I asked her if she was Mexican. So there is racism within the culture also that is not as identified as the so-called normal races.
Yeah.
Thought I'd throw that in.
Thank you. That's good, important. Any comments on this one? In the last 3 weeks, so we're in our fourth and last session here, have you noticed any racist thoughts or an awareness?
This is Georgia. I don't know that it's racist, but it's an awareness of white privilege. In that we send money to Ecuador to help Wilmer and his family because there is no work in Ecuador.
Yeah.
And Wilmer finally found a job, and Joseph asked me if I wanted to continue sending money. And I said, well, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. And then he can just put it into a savings account for when he's ready to buy a bus ticket or do whatever he needs to do to go to the embassy for an interview. And I all of a sudden realized he doesn't have a savings account. Right. He doesn't have a checking account. It just that, and he lives in a little village outside of Cuenca that doesn't have a bank. So it was recognizing that my thought processes are about me and not about anybody else. And I have to switch that around to be cognizant of what their lives might be.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you. So he also has a chapter about behavior being in the arena when we talk about racism and anti-racist. So I need a loud voice. Karen, will you read that?
Did you say Karen?
Yeah,
Did you
Karen.
Okay. Behavioral anarchist, one who is making racial group behavior functional and individual behavior real.
Yeah, that one dot, sorry about that. That one dot I forgot to take out, or I didn't see it. A behavioral anti-racist, it should read as one sentence, is one who is making racial group behavior fictional and individual behavior real. Can you see
Okay.
that?
Next one.
And remember, it's one whole sentence. The dots are not appropriate.
Okay, I'm not sure I get it. Behavioral racism, one who is making individuals, one responsible for the perceived behavior of racial groups, and making racial groups responsible for the behavior of individuals.
Yes. Yes.
I remember a time when I heard people say, you can even tell on the phone if it's a Black person.
Say that again.
I said, I remember some time ago hearing somebody say, I can even tell on the telephone if it's a Black person.
Yeah.
They all talk alike.
Yeah. Yes. So I wonder, I'm thinking probably all of us, I know I have heard comments that lump, that take the behavior of one person, individual that they've seen, and make that indicative of the whole group, which he's saying is behavioral racist. So, you know, you might hear, I've heard comments about, oh, you know, that's Black people are just lazy. You know, they just don't want to work. It's taking the behavior of one person or two people and expanding it to the whole group, which is what he's saying is behavior. Yeah, behavioral racist.
All blondes are.
All blondes are. That's.
Yes, Reverend Sharon.
All blondes are very clever.
I think I have a certain amount of behavioral issues to deal with parties that have opposing beliefs to mine. And I find myself reacting inside of me when I encounter certain conversations and people.
Yeah.
It's an uncomfortable feeling. It's an angry feeling. Yeah. And I have a hard time coming to the fact that they are me, I am them. We are all one.
Yeah.
I find that difficult. And what part of me has such a problem with what they're saying?
Yeah. Well said. And I, you know, as I hear you saying that, for me, that fits into what we're talking about right here in this slide, that it's so easy to look at a few and make it the whole. Even when it comes to politics, there may be some or one and not all have the same mental and moral compass that a few have. But it's easy to think they all do. If this one does, then they all do. So, yeah, that's, you know, there's, what's the word there's discernment. We're asked to be wise. Wise as serpents and gentle as lambs. And serpents have always been a symbol of wisdom, divine wisdom. And so we're, as human beings, we're called to educate ourselves or study or learn spiritual principles so that we can discern, use wisdom in discerning what is acceptable behavior and what isn't, so that we're asked to judge righteously. Jesus said, judge with righteous judgment. He said, don't judge people, but judge with righteous judgment, which means judge according to divine law and divine principle. So. Okay. Whoops. So he talks, this was so interesting to me. Let me move this so we can all see it. Not what I wanted.
We can all see it, Reverend. It's just, this is
Okay.
blocked on your screen, but we can see it.
Oh, okay, all right. So, so he says, the powerless defense says the more than 154 African Americans who have served in Congress from 1870 to 2018 had no legislative power. In other words, there's the excuse or rationalization, I can't do anything because I don't have the power to do it. It's claiming powerlessness when in fact he's saying there were 154 African Americans who were not powerless. They served in Congress and they could have done something about policy. He says, it says that US Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas never had the power to put his vote to anti-racist purposes. It says that the world's 11 Black billionaires and the 380,000 Black millionaire families in the US have no economic power to use in racist or anti-racist ways. It says that the 16 Black CEOs who've run Fortune 500 companies since 1999 had no power to diversify their workforces.
So I'm sorry, what I'm getting from that is he's saying that that is what powerlessness is. When you have that thinking that you have no power to do anything.
He is saying that in cases where you actually have power because of the position you hold, right, and you do nothing,
right, that's powerless.
Because the excuse is powerless. Mm-hmm. I don't have the power to make any changes. Right. He is calling that racist. Okay. And I think Yoli, someone here spoke to it today to say, when you say nothing, it's approval. Mm-hmm. Tacit approval. So what do you think about this? What are your thoughts here? What is powerless?
This is Kathy. I found that interesting, the 16 Black CEOs. And in fact, I found this whole slide interesting. I used to report to a Black CEO, and he always impressed me as being above everybody, above everything, and really was not that compassionate. And this was we were the fundraising arm of a huge hospital system. And I never thought, it was like he was unaware that there was anybody who isn't up at his level, and anyone who wasn't at his level was kind of worthless. And it didn't matter what color. It was not supportive. He was very, I'm trying to think of the word, just superior, yeah. And it disappointed me because he had so much power, and he never, I didn't think he used it very wisely or compassionately.
Yeah. Did any of you see the movie, The Green Book? No. Actually, Kendi talks about it in his book, The Green Book, which was kept in Black homes It was like a set of rules about how to behave and not behave to keep you safe, So that movie, The Green Book, was a true story about the concert pianist Don Shirley, who I believe it was the 70s or 80s, who was, I mean, he was world acclaimed. He traveled the globe performing as a concert pianist, and he was arrogant. And he decided, however, that he was going to travel through the South to do concerts, but it was going to be classic music and jazz and, you know, a whole array of, a full spectrum of music. And but he wanted a driver. He wanted a white driver. And so the one who got hired, he interviewed a ton of people, and the man he hired was the man who confronted him on his arrogance. I mean, not saying you're arrogant, but he didn't bow to him. And so, and he was a street person. The white guy was, I can't remember the guy who played it, but it got an Academy Award. Anyway, the point being that kind of thing that Kendi is pointing to here, where he looked at Black people who have had tons of power to make policy changes, and yet they haven't. They pulled the Trump card of, I don't have the power to do it, I can't do it. Or as you were saying, Kathy, it was outside of their mindset and awareness. Any other comments about this?
I'd like to say that one of the things that people don't understand is that there's a saying through Weight Watchers that says an inch is a cinch, but a yard is hard. It takes chipping at the norms, and by them calling themselves powerless, it's a total defeat of the situation, because their one little nick into the situation will encourage others to take that step until you have a full response. But it's easier to be powerless. And I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that there are people out there that have a great deal of influence. I'm not particularly excited about Clarence Thomas because he hasn't made a stand in many issues that were important to people other than white collar people. And you gotta do a nick and a nick and a nick until you take that tree down. And so powerlessness is kind of cowardly to me, you know, because it's a chosen decision. When you don't make a decision pro or con, the undecision is the decision. And so they have a right to influence the situation. You know, even one vote makes a difference. And so I get frustrated by the fact that you can actually make a change. It might be not a lasting change, but it'll be an accumulative change. Anyway, that's what I was thinking.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie.
Also in this, you see economic racism.
Yeah.
Because they've been able to reach to a certain point that they're looking down on not wanting to ruffle feathers,
right,
and looking down on those that are below them.
And
they feel is below them.
Yes. And Kendi goes to, let me see if I can find it in the book. He segues from the powerless card to what it really is, in his opinion, which is self-interest. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Yeah, he says, The history of racist ideas is the history of powerful policymakers erecting racist policies out of self-interest, then producing racist ideas to defend and rationalize the inequitable effects of their policies. Self-interest, calls it self-interest, or protecting my turf, protecting my safety.
This is Sig.
Yes.
On that note, I'm thinking, and this is the way I think, and I'm not sure it's correct, but those Black CEOs and Black millionaires that have reached that point are probably afraid that if they make any move to move somebody else up underneath them, they will lose their position and fall to the bottom again.
Yeah, fear.
Yeah.
Fear creates self-interest.
Right.
Yeah, thanks, Sig. So here's how he talks about, or the categories. The arena of racism includes all of these, which I mentioned a little bit ago. The ways of racism show up in all of these areas. Pretty, the full spectrum of society, of human society, huh? Any comments here?
Say again.
Dave? Unmute, Sig.
Did. Okay. It's so hard for me to say that. Anyway, I didn't understand what you were saying. Say again.
Oh, he puts all of these in the arena of the way racism can show up. So it can show up in power, which was the example we just had of CEOs and policymakers and Supreme Court justice. Biology, what people look like, and you spoke to that, Darlene, how there's some racism there that you experienced in grade school. Ethnicity, Yoli spoke about that quite well. Body type, you know, have you ever thought about, basketball teams are loaded with Black people because Black people are so tall. I've thought that.
White people can't jump.
Huh, and what?
White people can't jump.
Can't jump. Oh, golly, how it shows up so subtly. Culture, behavior, color, class, gender, sexuality, failure, and success. Racist thinking can show up in any of those arenas, he's saying.
So he's expanding it from just being racial, black, white.
As we think about it.
Yeah, as into all of these areas.
Yes, yes. Because this, Kendi is talking about creating policies that his thinking is create the policy that is enforced, and then the thinking will change. So here's a picture of him. I was so interested in one of the last chapters of the book. He talks about marrying the love of his life, and then she developed breast cancer. And so he nursed her through that, and she came out of it fine. And then it wasn't long after that that he was diagnosed with 4th stage colon cancer. And as he was considering his life, am I going to live or not? And taking all of the therapies that were advised, he decided he had a metaphor that the cancer that was eating up his body was a metaphor for the cancer in society, the cancer of racism. I think for me, it was a very powerful realization on his part, or the way he decided to think of it. I didn't say it on Sunday morning because I had been contemplating whether to say it or not. And that was as I began to think about the virus that is the focus of thinking and speaking these days. I thought, you know, that is a metaphor for the virus of the mind, that, or virus of consciousness that we can see. And it has to do with everything we've been talking about. You know, drawing a circle, I think Georgia said this, drawing a circle around myself and my stuff and my loved ones, and everything else is outside that circle. And so it's a great divisiveness instead of seeing that we are all one and working toward peace and harmony and a society that works for all people. Any comments?
I like Sig's comment.
Who said that?
Karen said she liked Sig's comment. You missed it.
Oh, thanks. Okay, well, I'd like to hear from everyone just a little bit maybe. What has been maybe most helpful or meaningful? What is, the way I framed it was, what are your takeaways from our discussions?
Well, I can tell you for me, it just stimulates my thinking about the internal work I need to do. And pointed out to me that I have racist tendencies, maybe not the kind that would commonly be seen, but they're there, and they're not good.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Sig?
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. It has helped me become more aware of the way I think about others and myself in relationship. I have been brought up short a few times in my life, in my thinking, and this just helps round it out.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks. Anybody else?
I'd like to say one thing, and I myself had caught myself, don't think that we all don't do it. I have caught myself being racist in my mind, and then I questioned it and said, wow, I never would have thought that having been, I don't like calling myself a victim or a survivor because we all serve this world, but I have caught myself walking across the street because there was a Black person that scared me on the street, and that shocked me. Or I see people that, oh, well, he's homeless, he's a bum. That might have been an attitude that I had years ago, but now seeing that really good people, that veterans and all those, that there's another picture to the homeless situation. And so that made me want to contribute to their uplifting. But yes, we all have prejudices. And as soon as we can be enlightened by saying, oh my gosh, that's me, then we can look at it and say, so now that we know it, what's the plan? There has to be a plan for a reply to the situation. But I was frightened about walking up a street because this was a young, healthy Black male, and I thought, he could hurt me. And because we've been taught that. Yeah. So there are so many prejudices within us that we really need to look at. I agree with Sue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Yoli. Paul, what do you have to say?
Unmute.
Unmute.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah.
I think we need about 10 more people in this group who are not white.
That would be nice.
Wouldn't that be great?
Because
That would be so great.
experiences of people, to me, is that helps me to understand.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if we don't have that interaction, you can't develop the understanding.
Mhm.
And so I vote that we clone Yoli.
Yes.
Clone Yoli.
I actually feel blessed to be around all you smart people because it
No, wait a
also
minute,
helps
Yoli.
me grow.
What on earth makes you think that you're not smart?
Oh no, I know I'm smart, but I know
There you go.
I have a lot of learning to do.
Thank you. Betty.
Thank you, Sharon.
Betty.
Love you.
Unmute. There you go.
Yeah, I think this last line that we talked about is really important. Remember, right in the very beginning, I said I didn't like the word anti-racist because I don't like to be against anything. I think everything needs a chance to speak. But when he says we should eliminate the concept of using racist, saying I'm not racist, and realize that we really have to decide whether we are being racist or anti-racist. In other words, just saying, well, I'm not racist means I'm not doing anything either bad or good. And we really should be doing something to solve this problem. Yeah, okay. I have something else, but I'll give somebody else a chance.
Thanks, Betty. Thank you. Nancy?
Yes. I'm used to much more diversity around. I'm relating to Paul and Yoli in what they said. I taught in Junction City. It was in Kansas, believe it or not, near the military base, and it was 51% minority. And then I taught in Manhattan, and the diversity there was not so much differences of race, but more people from different countries because K-State University was there. So when I came to Arizona, I expected diversity. And I was really, really surprised that there wasn't more. And unfortunately, it's made me more aware of needing to feel safe when I do run into minorities of some particularly men of different color. And then I've also become more aware of what I can do to deal with my racism towards some of the political figures in our world, because I really have a trouble not getting angry and accepting them as people and not as an ideology.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, reminds me what you said, Nancy, that when I was teaching school and when I was a high school counselor, and when I was raising my own kids, I heard more than once, and I wasn't always great at it, but you love the person and direct the remediation to the behavior. So we don't have to accept everybody's behavior.
Exactly.
We are called, spiritually speaking, to accept them as human beings. And I know, as someone was saying, that God, I think Paul, God, the Spirit of God is in them, whether they're aware of it or not, but their behavior is what is unacceptable and cannot go on.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anne, would you like to say anything before we close?
This has been very interesting. I've learned a lot, thought a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for being here. Well, let's pray out, shall we? Next month, the class will be on prayer. And God knows racism needs our prayers. So God, we just give thanks for this time together and the new awarenesses, the feeling of community amongst us, the vulnerability, the candid sharing, the everything that everyone brought to this. I just give thanks for it, Lord, and I know that you are blessing each and every one, that you are blessing their willingness to come into this conversation with beautiful experiences. And so as we go into the rest of our day, we go with a sense of gratitude, excitement, and enthusiasm. Thank you, God. Amen. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.